The 70s were full of numerous horror, supernatural, and slasher series. Ghost Story is one of the many gems that were produced at the time. However, don't be so misdirected by the name of the series, as the episodes focused on not just horror, but also supernatural themes. With a professor turning into a vampire, a young girl with telekinetic powers being used as a pawn in familial revenge, to a father having premonitions about the future death of his daughter, the series has got you covered on numerous themes as we explore the making of the series, some of its stories, as well as its phenomenal cast. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I want the baby. She's my child.
The Haunting Origins, The Making of Ghost Story, 1972. Ghost Story was an American anthology series that ran for one season, airing a total of 22 episodes, as well as a pilot from March 17, 1972 to March 30th, 1973 on NBC. With NBC's already popular scary anthology series Night Gallery reaching its final season in 1972, the idea for the Ghost Story series was pitched by filmmaker William Castle to NBC, who later worked as an executive producer on Ghost Story. NBC had greenlit the series in hopes of reaching a young demographic during Friday nights by focusing on telling stories on an hour-long supernatural series. Following a similar format to Night Gallery, as well as The Twilight Zone, the series was hosted by actor Sebastian Cabot, playing Winston Essex, the owner of an elegant but mysterious hotel known as Mansfield House, and introduced the main characters of the episode's story, often being guests at the hotel too. Though even with interesting episodes that were almost of the length of being a television movie, the show's ratings were not high enough, leading to a soft reboot following the show's Christmas hiatus. The series returned with a new name, called Circle of Fear, and removed the host Winston Essex altogether, focusing just on the story featured in the episode. Despite the change and airing of the remaining 9 episodes, the series failed to garner ratings against its competing shows, Friday Night Movies on CBS and Room 222 on ABC. The series ended up being canceled after only one season, though in recent times it managed to find a new audience in the streaming era. A closer look at the sinister stories in the episodes. The pilot, titled The New House, focused on a young couple, Eileen and John Travis, who had been staying at Mansfield Hotel while their house in the countryside was being built. Soon, the couple left for Pleasant Hill, where their new house was located. Eileen was also pregnant, with only a month left until the due date, and after moving in, had been hearing strange noises around the house, leading her to hear the footsteps of a person one night. She woke up John to tell him about it, and when John went outside the room to check, Eileen heard the sound of footsteps coming from the other side of the door. However, both John and later the police found nobody inside the house. The next day, after talking to her housekeeper, Mrs. Ramsey, Eileen found out that there were rumors about the house's land being a cemetery earlier. On the same night, Eileen heard a cracking noise coming from downstairs, and both she and John went down to check. But when John went to a different room, Eileen started hearing a burst of hysterical laughter coming from a new statue, which terrified her, but John remained oblivious. The next day, with help from the local library, Eileen visited the former local head librarian at his house and found that the land of her house used to be a place of execution in the 18th century. The last person to be executed there was a 19-year-old girl, Thomasina Barros, who had lost her husband in the war and then her child, ending up in a dire state and stealing a loaf of bread. That night after dinner, Eileen started hearing the voice of the executioner sentencing Thomasina, and believing it to be her imagination, she turned up the music on the radio. But the music was soon replaced with the executioner's loud voice, followed by Thomasina's hysterical laughter, causing Eileen to panic and break the radio. John decided to put her to sleep later by giving her a sleeping pill, but she ended up waking up a few hours later to find John on the phone with the doctor about her condition. condition. Eileen thought of drinking some water and suddenly started seeing Thomasina's execution occur right in front of her eyes in the mirror. The moment Thomasina was hung, Eileen felt her throat being choked, causing her to fall on the floor. John returned to the room and noticed Eileen on the floor. Upon being asked, she requested to be taken to the hospital. Eileen gave birth to a healthy daughter named Carolyn, and some time away from the house also made her feel better. Upon her return, she noticed that John had removed the statue, which had made her scared earlier, though the following few days remained normal. Eileen started believing that it was probably the anxiety of her pregnancy, due to which she was having scary hallucinations. But finally, everything came to a head on a stormy night when John got home late coming back from work. Eileen was kept company by Mrs. Ramsey when suddenly the lights went out and Eileen went on to check on Carolyn in her room. Mrs. Ramsey, who had been staying upon Eileen's request, was suddenly told by Eileen to return home, but the figure who talked revealed herself to be Thomasina. Eileen noticed Mrs. Ramsey leave from the window of her room and tried to stop her but failed. So she soon decided to wait in the station wagon with Carolyn until John returned home. But as she carried Carolyn in her arms to go down, Eileen noticed the ghost of Thomasina coming upstairs. Eileen quickly went back into the room and locked the door, but Thomasina was able to open it. Thomasina started walking towards Eileen, asking for her baby, but Eileen kept on declining. John returned home to find Eileen holding Carolyn and sitting on the floor. He tried to hold Carolyn, but Eileen didn't allow it. When John went down to get some brandy for Eileen, she noticed her daughter being possessed by Thomasina, with her hysterical laughter being heard. The host, Winston, then revealed that John didn't end up realizing the events that transpired, and Eileen got quieter as days passed. The official first episode of the series, titled The Dead We Leave Behind, focused on forest ranger Elliot Brent and his wife Joanna Brent, who lived in a small cabin in the mountains. Elliot and Joanna had been going through a rough patch in their marriage, with Elliot spending the majority of his time at work, while Joanna stayed home and watched television, neglecting her household chores. One afternoon, when Elliot returned home after helping his friend, Titus Paul, bury a body, he found Joanna watching television and frustratedly revealed that he had bought the television set to prevent Joanna from having extramarital affairs. Joanna, in retaliation, revealed that she was going to leave him and took out her packed suitcases, also mentioning how lonely and boring it had been ever since she moved to the cabin. Elliot asked her if he had any messages, to which Joanna revealed that she had turned off the communicator and, as revenge, tried to break it. The ensuing chaos caused Elliot to push Joanna to stop her, and when he turned back to check on her, he found her body lying still on the floor. Realizing that Joanna had died, Elliot took out a bottle of brandy to calm himself, when suddenly the television started showing his and Joanna's fight, leading to her death. The television then also showed Elliot carrying Joanna to his car with her suitcases and then driving it to a cliff, following which he came out of the car and let the car fall off the cliff, leading to Joanna's death looking like an accident rather than a murder. This gave Elliot the idea to do the same, but before he could put the suitcases in the car, he got contact on the radio about a car being spotted 5 miles away from his residence with no signs of the driver. Having to take his car to work, Elliot took out Joanna's body along with the suitcases and kept her in a shed outside. With no signs of the driver found, Elliot returned home, and after informing his colleague about it, noticed the television showing a wolf trying to dig in front of the shed's door after probably smelling Joanna's body. Despite disconnecting the television plug, Elliot kept on seeing the wolf digging, forcing him to go outside and scare off the wolf by firing his rifle. Elliot followed this by burying Joanna's body in the ground inside the shed. Later, Elliot was unable to sleep due to the wolves howling and got up to notice somebody trying to enter the house. Upon opening the front door, a man with blood on his head fell inside the house. Elliot placed him on the sofa with a blanket, and moments later, when he woke up, Elliot introduced himself, following which the man went back to sleep. Later, the television television showed Joanna hugging a man and then revealed him to be the same man who had arrived at Elliot's place, also revealing that Joanna was planning to elope with him after leaving Elliot. The next morning, the man woke up to reveal that he had a run-in with a deer while driving, causing his car to get stuck, and, noticing Elliot's picture with Joanna, asked him about her. Elliot lied and told him that she was staying with a neighbor, and then went to get the man's car for him, but also locked the shed so that the man couldn't check. Elliot met with Titus Paul, informing him about the man, but also lied to him that the man was driving Joanna to town. The man started snooping around the shed, breaking the lock and finding Joanna's suitcase inside, along with noticing the uneven layer of dirt inside. Elliot arrived soon after, and noticing the shed's lock broken, understood that his secret was found, and in the guise of asking the man to help him remove the tow, killed him. Elliot buried the man's body right beside Joanna's inside the shed, but failed to drive the man's car to somewhere else far away. Elliot returned to his cabin to drink, coming out again to drive away the wolves near the shed. Upon returning, the unplugged television started showing movements coming from the buried ground. When Elliot went to check the shed for it, he found a hand coming out of the grave and decided to lock the shed by nailing wood on the door. The unplugged television again started showing the two bodies digging out of the grave and breaking the shed's door, causing Elliot to panic and then break the television to stop the visions. But when he went out to check the shed again, the door broke open as the two bodies came out holding the shed's tools. Elliot tried to run away in his car, but with the car not starting, went inside his cabin and locked the front door, placing furniture in front of it, and then hid under the table. The next morning, Titus Paul arrived with another ranger at Elliot's cabin to look for him and noticed the man's car parked outside. Upon entering the cabin, the two found the place to be a mess with furniture lying around. When they checked the shed, they found 3 graves, with the third one having Elliot's hat on it. The second episode, titled The Concrete Captain, focused on couple Ed and Kate Lucas, who were on a road trip to celebrate their 10th marriage anniversary. Ed gifted Kate a memento of the town they were in, a small chunk of concrete with a miniature harpoon sticking out of it. Kate felt intrigued by it, but also started recalling a nearby hotel, even though she had never visited the town. Due to Kate's multiple requests, Ed drove them to where she believed the hotel to be, and they found it too. The hotel was named the Captain's Cabin and was looked after by an old man named Daniel, who, even though was opposed to the idea of the couple staying initially, ended up allowing them to stay. The couple also visited the late Captain Jonathan Harker's grave near the shore, which was similar to the memento Ed gifted Kate earlier. But after they left, voices could be heard of Jonathan calling for his wife Catherine and his wife assuring that she was there. The couple visited the grave again after settling into their room, with Kate telling Ed how Captain Jonathan died when his ship got wrecked after learning the story from Daniel. Kate later also revealed that their room used to be Jonathan and Catherine's room back in the day. Later that night, Kate told Ed that she was hearing Jonathan's calling for Catherine, but Ed assured her that it was nothing. The next day, Kate came down with a fever, causing the couple to stay at the hotel for a few more days until her temperature came down. Soon, Ed noticed a strange occurrence of Kate walking to the shore, and upon being taken back to the room, she started talking about her husband being killed with a harpoon, though she later had no memory of it. Later, Ed asked Daniel about it and found that Jonathan actually died by being stabbed by a harpoon after he begged his harpoonist to put him out of his misery of being stuck between rocks with no escape. His wife Catherine saw the event unfold in front of her eyes and waited in the cabin for Jonathan to find her until the day she died. The following day, Ed started noticing more strange events, with a woman running around the cabin, the memento of Jonathan's grave having a large crack on it similar to the actual grave near the shore, and also noticing marks of someone's struggling hands on the beach. Once Kate got better, Ed wanted to leave the place, but Kate started showing a weird resistance, mentioning how she could not leave, and if she did, then Jonathan wouldn't know where to find her. Ed also started noticing occurrences of sudden leg paralysis, which caused him to fall to the floor floor. The occurrences came to a head when one night Ed found Kate walking towards the grave near the shore, and Ed followed her, but near the beach again faced his leg paralysis. Kate found herself stuck between Ed and the ghost of Jonathan, finally choosing Ed in the end. Ed, though, decided to put Jonathan out of his misery by using the harpoon and breaking the chunk of concrete which caused him to fall into the ocean. The spirit of Catherine asked Jonathan to release Ed similar to how he was released, leading to Ed and Kate's final reconciliation near the shore and finally their departure from the cabin. The third episode, titled At the Cradle Foot, focused on a recently divorced man named Paul Dover, who had a premonition about his daughter Emily as an adult dying after getting shot by a man on a carousel. The visions grew more vivid as he noticed adult Emily again and ran after her to a cemetery while in the park with a young Emily. Paul had another vision of seeing Emily's grave at Dale Haven Cemetery, a town in Wyoming, and noticed a bracelet, which upon waking up was found to be a gift for Emily, sent by her mother, Karen. Later, when Karen arrived to take Emily with her, Paul told her about his serious visions and how he had them 5 years before the death of his father, too. Though Karen insisted on not letting Paul be taken over by these visions, he had decided to visit the town of Dale Haven to somehow prevent Emily's possible death in the future. Arriving at the town, Paul hit it off well with the owner of the boarding house, Julie, and even got a job as a mechanic at her father, Ed's garage. Karen, meanwhile, also had the same vision of an older Emily dying near a carousel and contacted Paul about it, mentioning that Emily asked for help at the cradle foot. This gave Paul another clue as he noticed the words written on the town courthouse and after visiting it had a vision of a man named Rafe Norris being sentenced to life imprisonment for Emily's murder. Getting a lead from Ed about Rafe, Paul ended up at the carousel from his visions, which was run by an older looking Rafe, making Paul realize that the Rafe in his vision would probably be his future son. Paul was also shocked to find out that Rafe was none other than Julie's fiancé, whom she was going to marry the coming Sunday. Returning to the boarding house, Paul found Karen to be in town and discussed the complicated situation in which their daughter's life was tangled. Paul tried to persuade Rafe to postpone the wedding by revealing his situation, but he got dismissed as being delusional. Later, Paul tried to break Julie's engagement with Rafe by making her believe that he was in love with her, and even created a commotion at their wedding rehearsal, though it ended up not working. This made Paul desperate to stop the wedding, as Julie and Rafe's son would be responsible for Emily's death in the future, and decided to finish the story by shooting Rafe with his gun. Paul failed to go through with it, though, due to being haunted by visions of Emily crying for help on his way to Rafe. After returning that night, Karen and Paul had a reconciliation as she finally understood the visions that used to always haunt her during the time of their marriage. But it got cut short when Julie arrived in Paul's room to profess her love for him, and the next day the two decided to leave town to start a new life. But as they were putting bags in the car, Rafe arrived with a rifle to not allow Julie to leave town and got into a fight with Paul, which ended up costing Rafe his life as the gun went off accidentally. On this account, Paul was able to go free without any charges being pressed for Rafe's death and decided to leave town happily with Karen. But as they drove by the carousel, Paul had another vision of an older Emily and decided to go meet Julie at the boarding house. A distraught Julie revealed to Paul that she was pregnant with Rafe's child and actually just used Paul to make Rafe jealous after Rafe had assumed that Julie was marrying him for the child's sake and not because she loved him. Paul realized that unknowingly he had caused the events leading to his daughter being in danger and wanted to shoot Julie dead. Karen persuaded Paul not to do it, as he had already caused Julie enough pain, and decided that it would be better for them to just be careful until the time of the events of the vision and protect Emily, as the couple finally left the town of Dale Haven. The fourth episode, titled Bad Connection, focused on a young widow named Barbara Sanders who started being followed by an unknown person one day on her way to work. Barbara worked in the reception of a law firm, taking calls, when suddenly she started getting calls from a person calling her name and then telling her that death was coming for her. Even after shifting desks, the call kept coming and followed her to her house, where she kept on getting them all night. On a visit to her old neighborhood, where she had a boat with her late husband, she found that that a neighbor saw a man similar to her late husband, Michael, eyeing the boat. One day, while having dinner with her fiancé, Keith Newton, at his house, the couple felt somebody keeping a watch on them from the roof, though the person managed to get away by the time Keith reached the roof. Barbara and Keith decided to consult Police Sergeant Appleton about these events, and he suggested that the person might be an old lover who might be jealous of her impending wedding. Barbara, even though unconvinced, visited Michael's brother, Steve, whom she had dated in the past before being with Michael, and his wife, Marion, about this. Marion's insistence that it couldn't have been Steve who was calling her made Barbara think about the possibility that the person calling her was Michael. That night, Barbara again got calls on the house telephone, even though she had disconnected the wire, and, after feeling that Michael might not be agreeing with the marriage, requested to Keith to postpone the wedding. Later, one evening, when she got stranded on a road due to her car running out of gas, Barbara got followed by somebody when she had to find shelter in an empty house, and upon trying to call somebody for help using the telephone, found herself hearing the voice of Michael again. One evening, after having auditory hallucinations about the day Michael died in the war, Barbara finally responded to Michael over the telephone and decided to visit the area of their boat after being told to remember the promise, which was also the name of their boat. Reaching the boat site, Barbara was confronted by a figure who revealed himself to be not Michael, but Philip Briggs, a man who had been with Michael till the time of his death. Philip wanted to see Barbara after Michael's stories about her and attacked her for moving on from Michael, as he had fallen in love with her too. Barbara and Philip's confrontation led him to fall into the lake, where he got dragged underwater by an unknown figure. Later, upon discussing it with Keith, Barbara found a news story about Philip, who had been dead for over a year. Barbara also realized that the promise Michael was asking her to remember was of him always protecting her from harm's way, and believed that it was Michael who saved her. Keith, even though not fully convinced, was glad that Barbara was finally safe, as they decided to resume and finally be together with Michael's blessings. The major characters and cast of Ghost Story. The series had a changing cast every episode, with only Sebastian Cabot making regular appearances during the first 13 episodes as Winston Essex, the host, as well as the owner of Mansfield House. Notable actors appearing in the show were Barbara Perkins and David Burney, appearing as John and Eileen Travis, the owners of a haunted house in the pilot The New House. Jason Roberts starred as a forest ranger, Elliot Brent, with Stella Stevens portraying his wife Joanna in the episode The Dead We Leave Behind. Karen Black appeared as Barbara Sanders, the young widow haunted by calls in the episode Bad Connection. And even a young Jodie Foster appeared playing Judy, a deaf and mute girl with telekinetic powers in the episode House of Evil. Popularity and significance of the show. Ghost Story, even in its 23-episode run, gained a popular following from children at the time with its intriguing, gut-wrenching supernatural themes. Many even remember its retooled version, Circle of Fear, a bit better than the initial Ghost Story. The show, through its deceptively simple stories about people in terrifying circumstances, shared tales of morality and karma, with some of them deserving of what was coming to them. The show also featured the works of many talented directors like Richard Donner, David Lowell Rich, Arnold Lavin, and many more. Each episode's 50 minutes allowed it to delve into the events and themes of the story, with some phenomenal work done by the actors. Marvelous verdict. Ghost Story, despite its short run and only a handful of episodes, has managed to gain a cult following in recent times, with stories that may seem tame on the surface, but have deep, profound things to say about the human connection. Connections that sometimes go beyond the grave, and karma that may come back to bite you in the end. Not all stories have their ending wrapped in a bow, but some of them manage to show haunting ends for the main characters. With a rotating cast, one can easily choose their episode of choice and watch the show in any order they choose, but it's worth watching the whole series at least once to catch some phenomenal acting and familiar faces that still grace the television screens even today. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.